Conversations with Elders, hosted by yours truly, Louis Marie Blanche, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432, where we will be TED Talking in tongues with the elders of all ages, all generations, all races, cultures, and creeds. All gender, religious, or political preferences will be honored and encouraged on Glastonbury Radio 432, Conversations with Elders, where it is our treasured pleasure to roll out the red carpet of golden liquid love light to you in honor of the queendom come, soul dancing free to life's heartbeat drum, in honor of mother, daughter, sister, lover, priestess, goddess, friend, sharing the blessings of love's perfect stranger, Deja Vu, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432.
It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic.
Aloha, hola, aho, hello. Here we are once again with my beloved Deborah L. Kelley, and we are reading The Garden of Desert Rose. And we are now on chapter 3, entitled Nature's Clues. Life has always seemed to me like a plant that lives on its rhizome. Its true life is invisible, hidden in the rhizome. The part that appears above ground lasts only a single summer. What we see is blossom, which passes. The rhizome remains. Carl G. Jung.
Lenny poured a cup of coffee and sat beside a secretary who worked in another office. The room was buzzing with planned trips to the Citrus Bowl. The head coach had invited all the administrative staff, including secretaries, to the Florida Bowl game. Lenny's first husband, along with his new wife and baby, had planned to visit during the holidays, and some of the days of his proposed visit matched the dates of the bowl game. But when Lenny asked him to babysit so she could go on the trip, he sounded put out by her request. He wouldn't promise. His job was in retail, and he reminded her January was inventory season. Lenny doubted he would actually even visit, although she tried to stay optimistic in front of her children. This year marked Lenny's first bowl season in the office. She sipped her coffee as she listened to her coworkers telling stories of their previous bowl trips. They spoke of fans going wild, tossing ice and beverages on each other. It sounded terrible, but wonderfully exciting at the same time. Lenny had married young, so as the stranger she'd met at the diner when she was 16 had predicted, it had come true. She often felt she missed out on the excitement of going off to college. But now, working for the university, she felt as if she were making up for a lost opportunity, at least in terms of school spirit. Although Lenny had never even watched much football on TV before this job, now she attended as many home games as possible, cheering loudly and enthusiastically with the rest of the fans. Her blood was definitely running orange, the university's color, as they said in this part of the country. As the coaches arrived at the office, the secretaries scattered toward their desks like chickens. Lenny walked to hers, opened her purse, and pulled out a small gift-wrapped ornament. She placed it under a plastic orange Christmas tree, strangled by long strands of fluffy white tinsel. It was the ugliest Christmas tree she'd ever seen. The wrapped ornaments was for one of the 4 office secretaries. Every year at Christmas, the secretaries drew names for gift giving, each of them keeping the name they had drawn a secret. This year, Lenny had drawn Katie's name. Lenny had purchased Katie's ornament in a little craft store near downtown Maryville. It was a crystal clear plastic ball with a silver flower shaped lid, and it looked like a snow globe. She'd attached orange and white ribbons around its neck. When it was turned upside down, tiny silver stars danced gently in the fluid inside the ball. Across the belly of the ornament were 3 words: love, light, and laughter. Lenny's heart yearned for all 3, so she almost loved the ornament too much to give it away. But that's exactly why it felt like the perfect gift for Katie, Lenny's favorite coworker and newly acquired friend. Katie was 10 years older than Lenny. She had taken Lenny under her wing from Lenny's first day at work. Katie also helped Lenny with her shorthand and always took the time to proofread Lenny's letters. Sometimes her coaches wanted practice plays typed and ready to hand out in a matter of minutes. One day, the defensive head coach teased Lenny about misspelling one of their important plays. He warned her if they lost the football game that Saturday, it would be because of her typo. But when the team won the next game, he laughingly gave her credit. After that, Lenny always asked Katie to help her proofread the plays too. Lenny so appreciated Katie, she really wanted to gift her with something special. So she hoped Katie would love the ornament as much as Lenny did. Soon it was 10:30, time for Lenny's morning break. She called Mitzi and her friend answered on the second ring. I had a dream last night, Lenny said without waiting for Mitzi's hello. Lenny? Mitzi asked in response. Well, I don't know why I asked. If it was you, who else would have a crazy dream they needed to tell me about? I was sitting here by the phone waiting on a ring back from the emergency room. I may have pulled someone's chart if they called back. I may have to pull someone's chart if they call back. Want me to call you at a better time? No, tell me the dream. You can't just hang up now that you've tweaked my curiosity. Well, it wasn't exactly a dream, Lenny said, trying to find words to describe Granny's visit. I'm pretty sure I've told you my maternal grandmother, who helped raise me, died when I was 17. Well, last night she came into my room and spoke to me. She gave me a very important message, but it's coded and mysterious. And you're calling me? Yes. Nancy Drew always worked on mysteries with her 2 best friends, and you are, after all, one of my dearest and closest friends. So, you've also got Dawn working on this mystery. What did she say? I haven't called her yet. She's working on her grandmother's rock garden this morning, and she won't be near a phone until later this afternoon. Well, Nancy, which of your 2 best friends do you see me playing? Lenny laughed. Who do you want to be? There's Bess, the pretty blonde, or George, the girl with the boy's name. I'm definitely Bess, Mitzi answered. Dawn is more masculine and self-reliant. She'd make a perfect George. I'll tell her you said that, Lenny said teasingly. You better not. But if you did, she'd agree. She thinks we're both too sissy and prissy anyway. Look, I know you can't talk but a minute, but I really wanted your input on my dream. I thought you said it wasn't a dream. I meant to say vision. It was like a spiritual wake-up call, and I need to figure it out because if I do, my life will be better. I'll blossom. Wow, this does sound intriguing. Keep talking, Mitzi said. I'm taking it out of my pocket right now. I believe I've copied it here, her words exactly as I heard them. Here it is. A center stays where it is. You are a desert rose. Now grow. What? Mitzi asked. I know, Lenny said. I'm just as confused as you are. But isn't the symbolism fascinating? Lord, Lenny, Mitzi explained, you had me expecting something truly profound. I simply don't understand what you just said. But it is profound. Well, to me it is. It's definitely some sort of coded message, and I intend to figure it out. Mitzi, these words did not originate inside my head. That's why I know they must be from some higher plane of consciousness. I didn't imagine my granny's energy. I can't swear it was her because I didn't see her, but it was feminine and bossy, exactly like my granny. She would not ask me nicely to grow. She would order me to get on with it and, and toss a few scriptures at me to make me feel guilty if I didn't obey. I know it was her. I guess you're right about that, Mitzi laughed. Why would anyone, granny or not, call me a cactus plant? And most puzzling is the part about a center staying where it is. How can I figure that out? I have been tossing this around in my head all morning. Granny was always telling me to let things be, to concentrate, and stay focused on what was in front of me. But my mind has always been like a butterfly flitting about here and there, enjoying one moment and then regretting it 2 months or 10 years down the road. Was that what was wrong with you last night? You sure were moody. But wasn't it funny when I lost my shoe? That made even you laugh. I laughed because I saw London and France, your underpants, Lenny said, laughing all over again. Okay, let's not get started on that again, she giggled. Let's get back to Nancy. Did your friend Bess ever help her solve a case, or was it strictly up to Nancy's intuitive detective skills? I don't remember, Lenny answered, but you're the psychology major. How do you think Carl Jung would analyze my dream? He'd sit you down and ask you a lot of questions. Then after you pay him a lot of money, he'd make you figure it out for yourself. Not true, Lenny exclaimed. In spirit, I ask for Jung's help all the time, so don't spoil my dream of our father-daughter mental bonding. I adore his genius. I've read almost everything he's written. I don't always understand it, but I know he possessed a knowing I can only hope and dream of someday achieving. He is awesome, Mitzi agreed. Well, this Bess is too puzzled to help her Nancy. Maybe Don or George will do better. Whatever you find out, Cactus Rose, keep me updated. Desert Rose, Lenny corrected, laughing again. Well, you were prickly last night, Mitzi responded. I'm newly divorced for the second time and can barely pay my bills, Lenny said, sounding a bit defensive. You and Dawn don't have children. I have two who need me to be happy. And I'm a terrible actress. It's exhausting, pretending I don't feel the way I feel. Okay, calm down. I'm just trying to be silly and get you out of this moody phase of thinking bad things about yourself. I'm sure your granny was doing exactly the same thing last night. Sorry, Mitzi, I know you're just trying to help. I hope to feel more enlightened about roses that grow in the desert after I drop by the library on my lunch hour. Finding my center, however, is probably going to be harder to define. Lenny, you are very blessed. I wish I had dreams like you do. Sometimes I wish I didn't. Some of my visions are unpleasant or maddeningly difficult to understand, like this one. That reminds me, Mitzi said, I took a dream workshop several years back. I'll see if I can find some of my handouts and bring them to you when I see you at Dawn's party. You're still going, aren't you? Wouldn't miss it, Lenny answered. Thanks for taking the time to find those sheets of your dream sheets. They may help me a great deal. I have a dream dictionary, but it isn't always helpful. Belly button, Mitzi suddenly exclaimed. I think center would definitely be located inside the belly button. Hey, I've got it. My supervisor just walked in. Lenny hung up the phone. Belly button? She whispered to herself as she walked back to her desk. When Lenny returned to her desk, Katie, who only worked part-time, had arrived. Lenny opened her bottom desk drawer and pulled out Florence Scovel Shen's book for her coworker, who eagerly took the book and immediately started reading a few pages. Katie noticed the book was crammed with lots of Bible scripture. She loved scripture, like Lenny's granny, but she wasn't preachy about it. Katie had once given Lenny a beautiful calendar with daily inspirational readings. This morning, Lenny had forgotten to turn the calendar to the next day. So after handing Katie the book, she walked back to her desk and flipped the spiraled page to December 22nd. I don't believe it, Lenny exclaimed. I just don't believe it. What don't you believe? Katie asked, rushing over to examine the words beneath Lenny's pointing finger. Look at that picture. I don't believe it. You don't believe a picture of a cabin in the woods? Have you been to this cabin before? No, you don't understand, Lenny tried to exclaim. This morning in my head, an almost lost memory resurfaced of a picture someone drew for me when I was 16. This photograph looks just like the picture he drew. It even has a big naked tree and a deer with antlers standing by a stream. I don't believe it. It's spooky. It's so spooky. Okay, dear, Katie responded. I'm sure it's just coincidence. She put her arm around Lenny. This sort of thing happens to me all the time. I never think anything about it. Yeah, but I'm not sure I believe in an accidental coincidence. The author of this book I just loaned you doesn't. Do you? Lenny asked. Yes, I do, Katie said, laughing, but I'm very interested in what this author has to say about such strange phenomena. Maybe you just need a vacation. We've all been working hard this past week. You're so sweet. I know you think I'm going nuts, but how can I go nuts when I've been a nut all my life, Lenny teased, watching Katie's warm motherly smile turn into a chuckle. Lenny's phone rang and she was glad. She needed to ponder her picture before she spoke of it further. Lenny's granny would tell her to let it be, to stop questioning everything that happened. But that was not who Lenny was. Carl Jung questioned everything, and it seemed he lived a long and good life. He didn't sit back and let things be. He lived a life that was heavily influenced from the start by early childhood visions and dreams. Years ago, in a psychology class, Lenny watched an interviewer ask Mr. Young if he believed in God. He answered, he didn't believe in God. He knew God. And as he spoke, his eyes twinkled as if he'd discovered a secret and could barely keep quiet. He spent his life looking within his soul, as if looking through a telescope and reading his work. One knew he had discovered hidden worlds within worlds, all hungry to be explored by everyone. She wanted to know herself, know God. If one man could experience the process of individuation, acquiring a true sense of wholeness and oneness with his Creator, then so could she. But to know her God self, she must first come to a clear understanding of the symbolic imagery of a desert rose. She could worry about staying put and finding center later. Lenny made a feeble effort to listen to the voice on the other end of the telephone line. She was relieved the caller only needed directions to the ticket office. Pressing a button, she transferred the call. As she hung up, she read the inspiration of the day beneath the cabin picture. It was Matthew 13:31 through 32. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all your seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches. Lenny couldn't believe her eyes. Here she was wondering why she'd been called a rose that blossomed in the desert. Jesus metaphorically spoke of the kingdom of heaven like seeds, plants, and trees. As she stared at the picture, she noticed a red bird perched on a branch above the deer. Like a heavenly messenger, the bird was looking down on the scene, observing. Suddenly, the phone rang again. Lenny was back to earth. Still deep in thought, she picked up the receiver and pretended to listen. Her mind was full of unanswered questions. Why hadn't Granny showed up warning her not to marry her second husband? She was so ashamed of her failed marriages. Her mother and sister tried to warn her about rushing into a second marriage soon after her first one ended, but stubbornly she followed her heart's desire. She desperately wanted family again. Because of this compelling need, she overlooked warning signs. The man she loved was not the forever kind. He adored Lenny as much as he adored all women. You're mine, he would tell her. And if she didn't do as he said, there was war. Lenny responded to the caller's request, almost without thinking. But now the man was asking something else, and Lenny didn't know what to say because she hadn't really been paying attention. Excuse me, sir, she responded. Could you please repeat that? I asked to speak to your head coach, and you told me he wasn't available. So then I asked you to let me speak to your offensive line coach, and you didn't respond, he huffed. Sorry, I was checking to see if his secretary was available, Lenny lied. I don't want to speak to his secretary. I want to speak to the coach. Just a moment, please, Lenny said. She was more than happy to transfer the call to the offensive secretary. The phone rang for the third time. This time, Lenny focused on her caller. It was a local fan Lenny knew by name who often dropped by the office. He had questions about the upcoming bowl game, and Lenny was happy to discuss all she knew with him. Sometimes fans thought she knew a lot about football just because she worked in the football office. She tried to fake it, and sometimes it actually worked. Her caller seemed happy when she hung up the phone. This morning, everything she dealt with, including simple phone calls, seemed like a bothersome distraction. When Lenny's lunch hour finally arrived at 1 o'clock, it was more than welcome. She reviewed her lunch plan. First, she walked to the bank. Then she'd make a quick trip to the nearby university bookstore before heading to the library. She'd eat her lunch as she walked. As she stepped out into the street, the wind whipped past her. Fortunately, Lenny's hair was too plastered with hairspray to move. She'd been pinching pennies to save money for Christmas gifts by brown bagging her lunch. She'd forgotten to pack anything to eat this morning, but she had half a cheese and pickle sandwich that was left over from the day before. Lenny ate as she walked, and the half sandwich disappeared in 2 bites. As she hurried from the bank to the bookstore, her ankle-length skirt got caught in the blast of wind and bellowed upward. The skirt's belt dipped down in a V shape over her stomach. She loved the waist clenching style because it seemed to flatter her belly. Thinking about her belly button, Lenny laughed at Mitzi saying it was her center. Perhaps Mitzi was right. But if Lenny had to assign a body part to the concept of a center, it would be the heart, not because it was centrally located, but because to Lenny the heart was the home of one's soul. It was a place where she could imagine God residing. Suddenly, a shock of cold air alerted Lenny to the embarrassing fact the back of her skirt had bellowed upward way too far. She tucked it back down as she hurried across the street. She wasn't as worried about showing off her underpants as she was about exposing the exceptionally large runner that ran up the back of her pantyhose. Inside the bookstore, Lenny bought a roll of Scotch tape, a pair of stockings, a football for her son, and a bright orange notebook for taking notes at the library. Her package seemed a little heavy as she walked up the steep hill toward the library. Once inside, she found an empty seat and hooked her package onto the back of the chair. She took the tape out of her shopping bag and taped her granny's message, written on the candy cane gift tag, to the top of the first page of her orange notebook. Then she located a book on exotic and tropical plants and picked up an oversized encyclopedia before running to her seat. She found a cactus-like plant that was indeed called a desert rose. But there were many different species. In the encyclopedia, she also found a desert rose that wasn't even a plant. It was a rock made of crystallized sand. The picture of the rock formation showed odd blossom-like characteristics that fascinated Lenny. Jimson rosette was its official name. Apparently, it formed under arid and sandy conditions. During happy hour with her friends, Lenny felt hard and cold as a stone. She had struggled to rise above her emotions. This left her feeling cold and numb to the world. This couldn't be the right way to live one's life, and Mitzi was right. She was acting prickly. She easily saw herself in both species of the desert rose. Feeling the urge to draw, Lenny pulled a black ballpoint pen out of her purse. She made 2 sketches of the fancy rock formations in her notebook before copying in abbreviated shorthand keywords that seemed like possible clues. Desert rose, adenum abusum hybrid, grown from seeds, numerous varieties. Some are tree-like, green, fleshy bark, blossoms vary, waxy, rounded leaves. Some have star-shaped blossoms. Fungus is its only enemy, needs good drainage. Tree-like hit Lenny in the gut. She suddenly knew this was indeed the desert rose she had been searching for. If the soul of God was expressing itself through her physical body, she liked imagining it as a tree that blossomed. A wave of emotion rolled through her, and she almost cried. Trees were more evolved than rocks, weren't they? She questioned herself, but the earth, being symbolic of the whole, still needed her rocks and prickly things. Yes, it was much easier for Lenny to imagine the sap running through trees, much like the God essence flowing throughout her physical body. Trees were ancient symbols rich with meaning, and the scriptures were full of references to trees, such as the 2 growing in the Garden of Eden. The Bible also said a man like a tree was well known by his good or bad fruit. Lenny supposed that as a tree-like desert rose, her fruit would be a rose blossom, a pleasant thought. For the first time in a long time, it felt good to be Lenny. Could she really learn to love herself again, she wondered? And most important, could she silence the tormenting blamer that lurked inside? She'd once read a seeker must become empty of self before God can enter. But maybe this was half true. Maybe God was already inside the heart like a seed. Once empty of self-blame and other rampaging, obstructive thinking, the God sap could freely flow. Now, solving what it might mean to be a desert rose, she was ready to take the next step. She'd locate center, stay put, and try to find some way to grow, and grow now. This part wouldn't be easy. Lenny turned the pages of the book to the picture of the the gypsum rosette. She studied the pictures of the cactus and the desert rose tree. Indeed, depending on her mood of the moment, she was capable of being all three. Perhaps when she was stuck in the depression over her misfortunate past, she was like a stone. A rock had life within it, but it was very dense. It had a very dense vibration. The God sap that flowed through it could not be seen with the naked eye. The desert cactus sap could be touched and seen. And when she was in a bad mood or sick, she was definitely a cactus. Her friends were holding a mirror to her face saying, "This is you now." Lenny picked up her pen to make a quick sketch. She didn't really like thinking of herself as a cactus, so she decided not to draw it. She was, however, glad she saw herself in this image. It felt so unpleasant. She definitely wanted to change. And there was no better time than right now. She felt ready to blossom, but just as she began to sketch the tree, her pen ran out of ink. That word came back. "Damn," she exclaimed a little too loudly. She glanced around the room. The only person who seemed to notice her outburst was a female student with ruddy skin and red hair. The young woman rose up from her chair and hurriedly walked in the direction of the ladies' room, leaving behind in the crack of her open notebook a yellow highlighter and a number 2 pencil. Surely she won't mind if I borrowed it just for a second, Lenny thought. Like a tiger sneaking up on its prey, she walked over to where Miss Red had been sitting and snatched up the pencil. Returning to her seat, Lenny drew a rough sketch of the squatty tree with clusters of open 5-petal blossoms. The tree's rounded leaves were hard to capture. She tried to darken the inner edges to emphasize a little shadowing. That's when the lead of the pencil snapped and rolled to the floor. Now Lenny was not only a thief, but a vandal. She decided to confess as soon as Miss Red returned. She couldn't just put the pencil back without saying a word. As soon as Miss Red got back to her seat, she walked over and apologized for borrowing without asking and showed her the broken pencil. Mrs. Red walked exceptionally so as she returned to her seat. She held her head low, no eye contact. Lenny got up and walked toward her, waving the broken pencil in the air to get her attention. Miss Red continued to ignore her as Lenny moved closer. "I stole something from you," Lenny whispered, bending close to the woman's ear. Mrs. Red's mouth dropped open, looking much like a dark, silent cave. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she appeared to have been crying. She slammed her notebook closed, as if trying to guard a top-secret document. It was just a pencil, Lenny thought, confused by the response. Immediately, without responding to Lenny's confession, Miss Red collected her things, got up, and walked away. Shocked, Lenny dropped the pencil and had to stop and pick it up before she chased after her, hoping to explain. Her high-heeled boots made a loud clacking noise against the old hardwood floors of the library. And then, as suddenly as Miss Red had run away, she stopped. Lenny almost ran over her. She couldn't help noticing the woman's face appeared white as a sheet, as though she'd seen a ghost. "Look, if you're Professor Brown's wife, stop following me," she pleaded as if begging for her life. "Who?" Lenny asked, bewildered. "I'm just the person who actually borrowed your pencil. I'm just trying to give it back to you. I'm sorry, but I broke the lead. I should have asked you first. I didn't read your notes or nothing. I didn't look at your notebook. Honest." "You did what?" Miss Red whispered in response. "I took the liberty, wrong I'm sure, of borrowing your pencil when you went to the ladies' room. I didn't read your notes or whatever if it was you were trying to hide in your notebook. You see, I'm here on a mission. My granny, long past, woke me up this morning. She gave me a strange message that has worried me all day. I'm trying to research some of these things she said, and my pen stopped working, and I saw your pencil." And Miss Red just stared at Lenny with squinting eyes that could barely control her anger. When you said, damn, I thought you recognized, forget it, she said, shaking her head. Well, I'm usually nice. I'm normally not rude to strangers, and I didn't mean to tell you my whole life drama. Please take your pencil back before I embarrass myself even worse, I said. Look, the woman said, I don't want my pencil back. You can have the damn thing. Just stop following me. Lenny stood speechless as she watched her victim walk away. A silly thought entered her mind. She wondered if there were degrees of classifications of sin in heaven's accounting system. Dismissing the thought as quickly as it came, she walked back to her library table. She put her stolen pencil inside her purse and stuck her notebook in her shopping bag. She took her belongings and moved toward the exit. But when she was only inches away from the front door, someone tapped her on the shoulder. Surprised, Lenny turned and faced her next door neighbor, Miss Tallulah. Lenny took a deep breath and tried not to stare at the librarian's hideous purple-black hair. You can't grow an adenum abyssum desert rose in East Tennessee. They hate cold climates, and it's much too humid here. I do not recommend you purchase one and try to keep it as a houseplant. Lenny stared at Miss Tallulah. Her mouth must have looked like Miss Red's dark open cave. Her research book was tucked awkwardly under her not-so-friendly neighbor's arm. Let me put my package down, and I'll return my book to the reference desk, Lenny said, feeling guilty. I've already taken this task in hand. That won't be necessary, Miss Tallulah responded crisply. Lenny noticed the corners of the librarian's mouth dipped downward as she spoke. She had never noticed that before. She looked much like a starving bulldog, and Lenny felt like her next meal. She wasn't sure what to say. She thought about sharing her story about Granny, but she'd already made a fool of herself more than once this morning. Miss Tallulah tilted her head down to peer above her reading glasses into Lenny's eyes with an ice-cold stare. Carelessly not returning your book to its proper place is not what I wanted to talk to you about, she said in a snippy voice. Have you any idea the damage your dog has done to my azalea bushes? Being a good librarian, Miss Tallulah kept her voice so low Lenny could barely make out what she said. Excuse me, Lenny responded sheepishly. Miss Tallulah pointed toward the door and motioned for Lenny to step outside so they could talk. Lenny did, followed closely by Miss Tallulah, whose voice then became much more audible. I put a note in your box last week, the librarian scolded. You did? Well, I didn't get it, Lenny answered, feeling more than a little surprised. It must have blown away. You could have called me. My number's in the phone book. Your dog has killed one of my prize azalea bushes. I don't ask much from my neighbors, but if you don't take responsibility for your pet, I will take matters into my own hands. I believe you called the creature Lassie, an original name, by the way, she commented sarcastically. My son was 3 when he named our dog. Lassie was one of his favorite movies, Lenny shot back defensively. And had I received your note, I would have responded. What did it say? I just told your dog has killed one of my prize azalea bushes. I want to know what you plan to do about it. My dog is a female. She squats. She didn't kill your azalea bush. Where I Were I to guess, I would say it was Goober. He's the miller's dog down the street. He's all over the neighborhood, peeing on everybody's bushes. I've more sense than you think, Missy, Miss Tallulah hissed. I've already taken the liberty to examine the sex of your dog. I'm fully aware she's a female. When she relieves herself in my yard, it attracts every male dog in the neighborhood, and I'm sick and tired of it. Lenny's mouth dropped open for the second time during the conversation, not in shock this time, but in horror. The witch of the neighborhood, the snoopy shadow behind half-closed drapes, this horrible, mean-spirited old woman who delighted in watching her every move, who was unable to communicate without frowning, had picked up her lassie with unkind hands and examined her sex. "Miss Tallulah, you're the bitch," Lenny exclaimed, raising her voice. Tears filled her eyes. This caught Lenny by surprise. She turned away from her neighbor and hurriedly walked away. "How dare you?" Miss Tallulah called after Lenny before storming back into the library. Fortunately, the walk light was lit when Lenny reached the first intersection on her way back to her office. She walked as fast as her heels allowed. Suddenly, a car sped past out of nowhere, missing her by inches. She almost dropped her shopping bag. Her face felt hot and flushed. Was this how her first step toward blossoming would begin? If so, it was a bad first step. A brick from out of nowhere had landed on her heart, much like the car that barely missed running over her. She had just hurt two people without even trying. In a matter of seconds, she had gone from loving herself to despising herself once again. Throwing rocks at others turned her right back into one. "Better thank your lucky stars," said an elderly man with a starched priestly collar. "Or maybe you've got an angel in your pocket." "No, just a candy wrapper," Lenny said with a sigh. She pulled out a nutty bar wrapper and made a sad face. Having felt run over by her neighbor and almost hit by a car, Lenny was suddenly rather emotional. In the game of life, Florence warned her readers about being careless with their words because they were like boomerangs that eventually came home. She wondered about her angry altercation with Miss Tallulah. Maybe calling her a bitch wasn't such a good idea after all. Since the priest was walking beside her, Lenny decided to ask for some advice. "Father, may I ask you a question?" Lenny asked, as they both watched for a second traffic light to change. "Is anger a sin?" "Not in my book," he answered. "Well, we all get angry sometimes. We wouldn't be normal human beings if we didn't occasionally lose our tempers. There is a lot of injustice in this world, after all. I myself can get very angry. Even Jesus got angry, but he didn't stay angry, and that's the secret. You've got to let it go." "Thank you," Lenny said, smiling. I needed to hear that. I was very angry a few minutes ago, but almost getting hit by the car knocked it right out of my head. I don't have an angel in my pocket, but I think you might be one." "That's awfully sweet of you to say," the man said with a wink. "I'll tell you a little secret about anger. If you bottle it up, keep it secret, and pretend it's not there, then it will grow into a mighty mean-looking creature. However, keep in mind, controlling or restraining harmful impulses that hurt others isn't easy, but your own happiness depends on it. Yes, I've seen it happen more than once. At the moment of our greatest darkness, light will come shining through. Don't give up. You watch out, okay?" "Yes, I will," Lenny promised. "Thank you again." The light changed and they walked across the street in silence. As the priest got in his car, he turned around and bowed low as if Lenny were queen. She smiled and waved. Her morning's quick emotional shifts from startled confusion, guilt, anger, sudden fright, followed by sincere gratitude for unexpected kindness, for being alive and unharmed, made Lenny feel as if she'd just gotten off an emotional roller coaster ride. This seesawing back and forth made her feel unbalanced and weary. Had she put logic on the shelf, exchanging it for an overactive, terminally serious imagination? Maybe Mitzi was right. Maybe she did need a vacation. But right now, all she wanted was to get back to work so she could relax. That's the
And
end.
that completes chapter 3.
Yes.
Nature's Clues. What in your heart's knowing would you like people to gain from that particular chapter?
Well, as a nature lover, actually, for many years, I was known as the fairy artist in local art shows, and people would look me up because I couldn't draw a flower or a tree without having a little nature spirit dangling or sitting on it or contemplating on a rock. And I think I saw um, my playful attitude toward life was seeing the magic in everything and the light of God in everything. And honestly, that came from a deep, deep, deep love for how I was raised. My mother was a gardener. She always had flowers throughout my house as a child. My grandmother was a gardener, and that love of nature was embedded in me from the very beginning. I see it also in my daughter. I see it in my grandchildren. Two of my granddaughters, especially, um, love being in the woods and around nature. And so we're just, as souls on a journey, we are to step back and realize that certain aspects of our true self mirror the life of plants. God starts as a seed, and it can, there's scripture that will tell you that the seeds fall in many, many places. And but it's up to us to water and nurture and feed uh, our souls so that they will grow. I know a recent teacher talked about the extraordinary and wondrous experience of bringing one's rainbow body, light body fully into our earth suits, and how one just, the manifestation of that, one doesn't age as quickly as those who are under the stress and strain of negative mind talk. And that means they're not getting nurtured, and they're not watering themselves with positive thoughts. And there's many teachers out there on the laws of life, the laws of attraction, the laws of people. Oh, it's everywhere now, and it's wonderful, but you have to apply it to your life. You have to utilize all these wonderful teachings. I have many, many teachers that have blessed me and inspire me. But nature is my first and my favorite teacher of all the teachers, besides you.
Bless you. Well, we go back to the quote that was used to usher us into this third chapter entitled Nature's Clues. It says that life has always seemed to me like a plant that lives on its rhizome. It's true, life is invisible, hidden in the rhizome. The part that appears above ground lasts only a single summer. What we see is blossom, which passes. The rhizome remains. So it's perhaps understanding what that was written by Carl Jung.
Yes, it was in his, I took that quote from his book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. I've read it like a Bible way back 30 years ago. It's a wonderful book still. Because I had bad psychology, Louis, and I had little funds to have assistance. So I had to heal and work on my own bad psychology. And having an absentee father doesn't mean that I get attracted to fatherly type men when there's such a a youthful, a carefree, happy part of me that's very childlike. Yet I didn't feel happy in the parent-child pattern I'd set early on. It was a hard pattern to break, but many times, instead of feeling bad or feeling guilty that you've made errors, that you cannot erase your past, and besides, it's just a memory. It's not even real. We make it real, but it's not real. The way you overcome that, or I found overcoming it, is just to see it for what it is. And oh, oops, I kept making this mistake over and over again. So it's the seeing of whatever it is you're working on. Once you see it, now comes the work to stop the pattern. And so that's where we're at in chapter 3. I'm starting to see some patterns come up, and
using nature as a metaphorical guide.
yes, like the desert rose that's the stone, in other words. The prickly cactus desert rose, which is, I was very prickly at times. I've been prickly with you, so you know what I'm talking about. But that isn't our essence. That's our emotional body surfacing, acting up a little bit, and we're not that. Our parents weren't those, their emotions always. When they were, I know my mother suffered a lot from depression, and I always wanted to be the clown to cheer her up because I loved her dearly. And so, but it was, I attempted it, but no one can truly cheer anyone up, or but it's an inside job. And I think nature teaches us that it's an inside job. And the universe loves us so much. We are gifted with trees and rocks and flowers to compare ourselves and our true essence to those things. Like in the acorn is the oak tree, and the image of the oak tree. We could stay in that little acorn and not grow, or we can do wherever we're planted, whether it be a child in poverty, or difficulties with parents, absentee parents, or parents fighting and not giving them the nurturing that they should and deserve. Of course, all of us deserve love and nurturing from our parents, but they can just take the imagery and the metaphor, like the desert rose tree, and say, it's vacant of a lot of love. It feels like a desert. I've got so many emotions I need to drain and release, but they're stuck. I can't seem to drain them. And therefore, if I were a desert rose tree, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to achieve health and wholeness. And if that's your goal, you will catch yourself in those moments, and it's with the help of these beautiful gift of nature that it fills my soul with joy. Yesterday we were planning this reading, and our car was by a butterfly that had been hit by a car. It was still alive, and it was just quivering. So I stuck it in my bouquet of flowers. And by the time I got home, but it wiggled. Do you remember how it wiggled? It was giving us joy because it was sitting on the flowers. And this symbol from that experience led me to believe that it was about heaven sending us a little butterfly, a symbol of freedom from negative mind talk and self-judgment. And we were right on track. It was just, to me, this is how I look at nature and what I receive in my heart. And I know you agree because we talked about it.
It's wonderful. Nature replenishes itself. And as you said earlier, it's an inside job. inside the seed, the true essence of the soul dwells there. And as Carl Jung's introduction to this chapter stated, we see the blossom on the outside, but what lasts forever is what's inside.
Yes.
And so the seed carries the kernel of our soul's essential, and we might say even quintessential essence. So if we're struggling in external ways, it's always good to look within and to take a deep breath and perhaps contemplate and meditate upon what am I besides what I look like on the outside, and allow ourselves, as plants do a lot, a seed does a lot to break through, even breaking through concrete.
Yes.
Through anything that might want to keep the seed from reaching for the sun, because the yearning within the seed is to get to the sunlight divinity.
Yes.
And I'm thankful that we are making our way through the Garden of a Desert Rose, and we will be approaching the Garden of a Desert Rose, chapter 4, which is entitled A Damaged Rose. And until then, we will hopefully see you again.
Namaste.
Well, that's it for here and now. But until we meet again, this has been Louis Marie Blanche thanking you for listening to Conversations with Elders on Glastonbury Radio 432. Bless you.
Quantum physics in the kitchen sink, the energy that follows the thoughts you think. Quantum physics and the cosmic sea, laws of nature too heavy for me. It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic, much too cosmic